We'd like to thank you all for coming to the funeral services for Craig M. Buckner. I know the family appreciates you being here to support them here at this time. We're going to go ahead and begin with an opening prayer offered by Christy Ryman. And then following Christy, we'll have a life sketch given by Tony Buckner. Then we'll have family memories by Corey Buckner, Jody Benson, and Brett Buckner. And we'll go to that point in our program.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity we have to be here today to celebrate my dad. I'm so simple able to have my spirit with us today. And be able to feel that love and be able to be at peace. We're thankful for the gospel and the chance that we have to know the families are forever. And I say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.
Whoever put me after Christy in the program, wrong. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming. I know many of you have traveled from afar, from out of state, across the country, to pay your final respects to my dad. You certainly didn't come here to listen to someone like me giving a first-time eulogy, so I apologize in advance. But if I could just do a quick show of hands, who in here is the youngest sibling in their family? If you could just raise your hand. Just want you to know something as the youngest sibling. Sometimes you get bullied even when you're an adult, and you get talked into doing really hard things like eulogies, and so it doesn't go away. How do I summarize the life and experiences of Craig Buckner? There are far too many stories that have yet to be shared with me to recount them in this talk today. Seems like every time I go to a cafe, a diner, or a fruit stand, someone knew Craig. He'd talk about their relationship, he'd talk about who their parents were, what kind of work they were doing, and random little tidbits that they themselves had probably long forgotten, but Craig remembered. Seemed like our scone and coffee time, every weekend, rituals were filled with people. Many of you, are probably here that knew him, that he would spend countless hours just talking to and sharing memories. Craig knew everyone, or just about everyone, in the small towns of Lehigh and Alpine, and he could recite story after story about their family. It was pretty remarkable, the people that influenced him and that he influenced. Craig spent most of his life here in California, except for a few years in California when he was a baby. He lived there in California with my Grandpa Max, when he took a job near Glendale, California. They moved back and settled out in West Salt Lake Valley before moving into American Fork and now Alpine, where Craig spent his childhood and attended high school. He made close friendships there. After high school, he went to the trade tech, studied refrigeration, which I don't know if I've ever remembered Craig doing anything with refrigeration. I think he hated it, actually. But he fell into an apprenticeship in sheet metal, and ever since then, he became a sheet metal worker, a union sheet metal worker. And many around Craig may not have felt that their work was personal. Like it wasn't a big deal. You did your job, you got out, punched in, punched out. That was it. Not to Craig. Every job Craig ever took had meaning to it. And he never once completed the job without giving his very best. He lived and breathed sheet metal. That was his life. That's what it was. Every time we drive past the North State Center in Lehigh, he'd always tell us, I put that shimmy up there, Gotta remind you, even though I hear it time and time again, everywhere he'd go, whether it be the Little America building up in Salt Lake, I can just picture some of the things that he would say, and it was always, hey, I did this, and I did this, and there was little pieces of Craig left everywhere. Craig got married to my mom early in his adult life. He had 3 kids, my oldest sister Christy, which you just saw from, and my sister Casey and me. I don't think they had much money, as both my mom and my dad, they ended up both working full-time jobs. So as kids, we never felt poor. We never went without anything. There was always a strong connection to family. As we rarely missed a Christmas or Thanksgiving, a birthday. In fact, I'll remember us all piling into cars and jumping over to Brad or Carrie's house and Hank's to see his cousin's birthday, and we'd all be there, and Grandpa Max would be like, man, time to go, let's get this show on the road. Every Saturday, Craig used to take me up to Alpine to water trees or feed cows and horses. And I don't really remember the work being all that exciting, but man, every Saturday I was jazzed to go up to Alpine, because I always knew that my grandma and my aunts were going to make me the best peanut butter jelly sandwiches you could ever make, with homemade raspberry jam and lots of butter. As we grew up, my mom and dad, they divorced. Challenging time for us all, to say the least. Feelings of bitterness and certainly confusion about where we stand with one another. Craig stayed close with his friends and family and co-workers, and they eventually introduced him to his wife, Patsy. And that really was the love of his life. Pat meant everything to Craig. He'd play it cool to us kids from time to time. We'd ask him about his romantic life and things like that. But deep down, Craig had some really deep feelings for Pat. And they married in their home in 1995. Stayed true to each other up until Pat's death just a few years ago. Despite all the grumblings that were reminiscent of Grandpa Max about wife spending too much money or buying things on QVC, him and Pat, they love each other deeply. The last few years of Craig's life was probably some of his hardest. Struggling to be alone. That lame dog, Foxy, kept him going. That tree farm that he always bitched at about having to go down there so many times, he loved it, and he loved the activities that he had with his brother. Even the walking sticks that you see out there today, definitely something that kept his interest and his mind going. The hours that he and Brett would spend driving 90 miles south, they were relived in conversations and stories. And all the stories about the San Peters down in South Beach County, always treasured on the phone. They were good, hard-working folks. And he truly cherished this one time with Brett, and finding random deals for pine nuts or treats for the best steak in town. For those of you that don't know, Craig, my dad, he took a fall recently, cracked some ribs. He struggled to heal, couldn't breathe, but he died peacefully on October 6th, surrounded by his family. So what does his life mean to us that remain? What are the important pieces that we should remember that for someone that my Aunt Jody used to call a character? For those of you that knew Craig well, you might remember an acronym he'd often use in random speech. Now, if you ever forgot the meaning or looked a little puzzled when he'd say it, he had no problem telling you over and over what it meant. In fact, I think the same acronym captures the basic essence of who Craig is. That acronym, FOT, which does not stand for flat on top. The F stands for fearless. I don't know of a single occasion where Craig Buckner showed any fear whatsoever. And it didn't matter if it was the meanest raccoon in the world or the sharpest tool next to him. That man was not afraid of anything. Starting at an early age, Craig was breaking windows with horses or doing things that no sane person would ever do. He simply wasn't born with any fear gene in him, and it's amazing that he lived as long as he did with that lack of chromosomal support. Craig's life as a union sheet metal worker put him in precarious positions where, and extreme weather conditions, where for the most 30 plus years of his life as a sheet metal worker, he worked in the industry. And he would rarely strap himself into safety equipment because it limited his ability to do the job and do it right. In fact, right before he retired from sheet metal, he took a job at the Micron plant just right down the road here. The job was probably the safest job Craig Buckner ever worked at. They had impeccable safety. He could have stayed at the job for years and years, but he retired because he hated the job. And the reason he hated the job was because it was too safe. It was too boring and mundane. That wasn't who Craig Buckner was. In fact, he called it the daycare center because of its boredom and the routineness of what the job did. Nothing could have bothered Craig Buckner more than routine and safety. It wasn't just being fearless in the job. Craig was fearless in everything. I remember a tree in our yard growing too tall and needing to be trimmed down. Of course, there was never any safety equipment around for Craig to use. And he'd place an old rickety ladder too tall to be safe and hoist up a chainsaw to take care of the taller branch, 30 plus feet up the air. A lot of these activities didn't always end well for Craig Buckner, as this one almost cost him his hand. And Craig sustained severe lacerations to his thumb, almost losing his thumb as well. Craig was also fearless in his ideas and beliefs. He often told doctors who were actively treating him that there was a reason why they still called it a practice of medicine rather than a science. Probably not the smartest thing to do to a practicing physician. But he had no problem telling him his position on a variety of topics. So for that, Craig F., you are fearless. But that leads me to the O in FOT. And O is outspoken. There's not another word that you can talk about for Craig other than just being a flat-out outspoken individual. He was the most outspoken person I think, in fact, I've ever met. He had zero reservations about sharing his opinions or thoughts on any subject. On any subject. I think this came to him naturally, as he'd always wanted to consider a job being a high school history teacher, where he could lecture and teach others about the history of events as they happened, as he saw them unfold. Being outspoken is a wonderful trait, but there were times when Craig's mouth got him into serious trouble. And I hope each of you were probably nodding your head going, yep. There were several jobs where Craig and the foreman disagreed on certain concepts escalated to him being fired. He had no problem with this. Thankfully, Craig's skill and his ability was worth putting up with because to several employers, because oftentimes Craig would find a job, if not that same week, the same day. One thing I vividly recall is Craig telling me that if he ever saw me, you're lucky you're not here, with a pair of these, he was going to break my hands and then break these. This is a pair of tin snips. They're a little rusty, but these are Craig's. I'm not letting them go of them now. Craig was always very outspoken about what he wanted to see in his posterity. And he always wanted us to do better than what he had done. I think he was proud of the way things turned out. Craig's outspokenness often created some difficulty even within his own private relationships, whether they be between siblings, or between spouses, or with his own children. There were times where his unspokenness caused frustration, and caused frustration with those that he loved. When he was challenged on his tone, or on his theme though, by the people that he loved, that's when the T in FOT would appear. And that T is thoughtfulness. And yes, I did say thoughtfulness, and Craig Buckner in the same sentence. And some of you may look at that and say, no, Craig Buckner wasn't thoughtful. I can tell you there's no doubt that Craig's outside shell was about as thick and as hard as they come, very unbreakable. But to those that only knew Craig a little piece, they were probably scared. They probably scared the hell out of a lot of people around him. But those of you that knew Craig, like the ones that Craig loved, I can't think of a more thoughtful person. Back in 2004, my family and I, we bought an older ranch home in Oklahoma. And it had some of the best items within it that 1974 could offer. I mean, we're talking shag carpet, oil lamps with like oil strings coming down and it lit up in different LED lights. I mean, they weren't LED, but they you get the idea. My wife hated it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So the house was in the city, about 200 people. with a big metropolis of 3,000 people being about 10 miles away. Cafes and churches were about the only thing in large supply in this little town. My family and I, we ended up moving out of Oklahoma up to Minnesota. Kept the house. And the following summer, a neighbor reported that several storms and tornadoes had come by, and that she had walked through our house and saw that some of the sheetrock had fallen from water damage, likely a leaky roof. Now, metal roofs are not something I had much experience with. In fact, I had zero. And I had no clue on how to fix it. So in my subsequent conversations with my dad over the next few days and weeks, I shared with him that I was heading down to Oklahoma from Minnesota to take care and possibly put some tar on the leaky spot. This was unacceptable to Craig Buckner. Couldn't do it. You do a job and you do it right the first time, was his canned response. Every time, to the way. And that's how we approached any task. There wasn't even an invitation. Craig loaded up his truck and he drove out 1,253 miles. Yes, I did the math on that. 1,253 miles each way from his house in Lehigh to my home in Oklahoma, just to help his derelict son fix a roof. The trip almost made Oklahoma down to Craig because he did it so well. Met a lot of good friends and found new cafes that he could fit in right away. Our car ride back to Utah was one of the best trips I've ever had. We didn't make great time because Craig Buckner always had to see a man about a horse. Even though I never saw a man, and there's certainly no horses out in Oklahoma. But I do use the same phrase from time to time. When I think of thoughtfulness, I can't think of a birthday that Craig ever missed. Can't think of a time when Craig can go out of his way to help a friend despite working 6 12-hour days. Can't think of a time that a vacation or a weekend escape ever took precedent over helping a family member or a loved one, re-roofing a house or doing some DIY project that most today would not attempt to just hire out. Craig was fiercely loyal and thoughtful to his friends and family. He was an example of being a big brother to his siblings and someone who looked after them but also helped when needed. Even when Craig was not at his best, if someone would approach him and ask him how his day was going, he'd respond, "Not worth a damn, but thanks for asking." This generally brought a look of shock to the person who would just ask that, but I always brought a smile to Craig Buckner, as he appreciated the ask from someone having a less than stellar day. So my conclusion on Craig Buckner, well, there it is, Craig. You got one final FOT before you said goodbye. Still feels like you're with us. As I drive home from work, well, I'll miss your stories about politics, the situation our nation's in. I'll miss the stories of the people that you ran into that I don't know, but you think that I know. And you're going to tell me about it even though I don't know them. I miss hearing that. Most of all, I'll miss your voice, Dad. And I'll miss knowing that you're near to us. Rest in peace, Dad. Well, I love you. I hope you and Dad are happy back together.
I have to agree with you, Tony. We need to discuss whoever laid out this program. The youngest person should not go first. Definitely should be the oldest to the youngest. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Corey. I'm Craig's youngest brother. I don't normally grow a beard, but I'm trying to win the No Shave November contest at work. I figure if I start now, which I've actually started this in June, I might get honorable mention next year. There's a possibility that I might even place or show in another 2 years. I like to think that I get a little bit of my sense of humor from my brother Craig. He has a tendency to overstate the obvious, As Tony mentioned, he was a sheet metal worker, and one day he was working at the Hotel Utah. And as Tony mentioned, he didn't like to strap in. He was working on a copper roof, as I recall, and got down to the edge and was checking on something and slipped. He turned around and he grabbed onto the gutter, and he was hollering for help. And the gentleman that was with him says, "Hang on, Buckner, I'll get help." He says, "What the hell do you think I'm doing?" I got to put on my extra pair of eyes here, sorry. As Tony mentioned once before, you can't go anywhere without Craig knowing everybody in town. Every little cafe, every fuel stop, every porta potty. He made friends everywhere he went. And as Tony said, if he didn't know you before you got to the cafe, you were his friend afterwards. Along that same vein, where I work in Idaho, I met a gentleman that came to work one day. A little gray-haired man wearing a Utah Utes jacket. So after I helped him with his project, I decided to ask him his name and where he was from. He said, "Oh, you wouldn't know me. I'm from a little town outside of Salt Lake." I said, "Go ahead and try me." He says, "Have you ever heard of Magna?" "You must know my parents then." "Who are your parents?" I said, "Max and Farrell Buckner." "Buckner? You're Buckner's son?" "Yes." "How is the old coot?" I said, "Well, he passed away." I said, "But my brothers and stuff are still alive." And of course he wanted to know about Uncle Fred and Aunt Sharon. So Uncle Fred and Aunt Sharon, if you guys are listening, please contact us, because I'd like to give you Pete Amalis' phone number. He really wants to talk to you. Like I said, at the cafe, I kind of took that page out of Craig's book for getting to know people when they come in. That tends to make him a bit of a flirt. I think that's the understatement of the year. When we went to Eugene, Oregon for Brett, when he was in the hospital up there, he said, "We're going to eat here because I know the food's good. We're going to stay at this hotel because I know I can get coffee." Speaking of coffee, that man has the smallest bladder of anybody I've ever met. And that includes my wife, don't shoot me. You always planned at least 3 rest stops on the way to anywhere you were going, and that was just by accident. The other ones were on purpose. One day we were driving down the freeway, and this is no joke. He's like, pull over, I gotta pee." I said, "Okay, I don't know where I'm gonna pull over on this freeway." He's, hurry, pull over." Okay. I pull over, and before I get stopped, he's out the door running down the side of the freeway. Where is he going? Somebody had left a porta potty off the side of the road. He come back into the truck and he says, "Man, they must have known I needed that today." It becomes such a joke at our house, or around his house, that I actually bought a picture, and I wish I knew where it was. It was actually a pencil drawing of 2 little boys peeing on a truck tire. When Patsy saw that, she hurried and put it in his bathroom for everybody to look at when they came by. I think Tony's got this gene trait, and I imagine Craig's passed it on, and this is kind of where the tree farm come into place, but Craig always had a scheme for making money. I'm going to embarrass Tony for just a second. I don't know anybody that could sell snow in the middle of winter with a wagon, but Tony did. So one day, of course, this was before Tony and those guys were born, and I don't know who Craig was with, but he used to do odd jobs to make extra income. He got a phone call from some gal that wanted a clothesline put into her backyard. He said, okay, give me about a week or so and I'll come out and put it in for you. So Craig and his buddy went out and they installed the clothesline, and she was extremely excited about it. It was fantastic. It was everything that she ever wanted. They left and she paid them, so they were happy. And about 3 or 4 days later, another lady called and said, you just put in a clothesline for a friend of mine. I'd like one just like it. Do you think you could get one for me? Oh yeah, not a problem, Craig said. A couple of nights later, they went up, dug up the first lady's clothesline, threw it in the back of the trunk. He said on the way home, the clothesline was dragging and sparking everywhere. He doesn't know how he didn't catch the car on fire or start a fire for that matter. A couple of days later, they installed the new clothesline at the second lady's house. A few days later, first lady called back, Craig, I need another clothesline. Somebody stole mine. I'll get on it, he said. I never did find out if I took it from the second person. Craig had a love for animals. He loved horses and dogs, and especially cows. Boy, they were good eating. We had a pet cow named Pet. I'm not joking, that was her name, and that was Craig's name for it. And for about 1.5 years, he'd say, boy, Pet sure tastes good. That hamburger was the best ever. This T-bone steak was fantastic. But one of his last thoughts was of his dog. He wanted to make sure Foxy had food and medicine before he went into the hospital. And now Foxy's going to come to with me. Sorry, guys. She'll be in good hands. She'll have a brother named Whiskey and 3 sisters, Chloe, Pika, and Josie. And in closing, I'd just like to say a couple of things. A really tired man on September 10th wrote these words. Craig had many nicknames, including Buck, Chainsaw, or 20 Vision, just to name a few. But one nickname that I cherish the most is Brother. So brother, I'd like to say, take care of yourself. That was always his closing line. And for all of you, please take care of yourself. Thank you.
Okay, unlike the rest of them, I have to take my glasses off. That way I can't see you, but I can see what I want. To start my talk, I wrote it like 6 times, Tony, and I said, Craig's a character, and we all know it, but he also had a very kind and loving heart. Like the time Hank and Craig were both at the cemetery together. Hank was dropping off flowers and a Diet Coke for Carrie, and Craig was taking flowers to Patsy and the cats to visit her. He also made sure that Uncle Bruce had flowers. He liked calling, when he was calling Christy or Sharon or me or anyone, well, how are you, young lady? Or telling the kids, I'm going to get your belly. He never forgot a birthday. Even his co-workers that he hadn't worked with for years, he'd call him on their birthday. For me, he'd always bring me pineapple juice when he could find it. But I hope he wasn't looking for pineapple juice when he fell in the fight, because I feel really bad. Craig's neighbors would always bring him dinner, and he would take them dinner. At Christmas time, he would fill up the back of his truck with apple juice from the Red Barn and hand it out. When we were younger, Craig had just a little bit of mischief in him. We had a clothes chute in the house in Alpine, so my mom didn't have to carry the clothes down 3 flights of stairs. Well, we were told not to ever go into that chute. But you know Craig, he went down it first. And we had our cousins there, the Flemings, and I think one of them kind of got stuck, so we never did that again. Craig, Kim, and Brad used to go up the canyon and go wood cutting for our wood stoves. Brad was watching Craig, and he was kicking this log and kept kicking it, and he couldn't understand what he was doing. Pretty soon he found out because it was full of bees. And they came out and they stung him and Kim. And Kim was the only one that dared go back up there to get the chainsaws. You'll hear a lot about chainsaws in Craig. When he was 16 or 17, he worked on a dude ranch. And he did have a love of horses. And he had a love of, I want to say cats, but I'm not sure. And his dog. I'll miss him sitting out on his front porch when I used to drive by. And he'd sit there and we'd talk about the neighbor's flowers. And he loved the purple ones across the street. And he couldn't wait for the purple mums at his house to come out. He'd say, "Can you see him peeking out yet?" And they did peek out just before he passed away, but not like they are now. He called Christy every day at the same time. And usually I'd call him on my way home from work, and he'd say, "I was talking to Christy." I'd say, "Oh, okay, sorry. I'll come back later." Another funny one was when my son-in-law had ringworm. Craig would bring them peach rings because it reminded him of ringworm. Craig had a heart of gold, and he would do anything if you wanted him to, and if you needed it. And we love you, and we'll miss you.
Who remembers the nickname Chainsaw? Like has been talked about, Craig was always trying to make money out of scheming. One time, he brought a bunch of wood up to the house. You know, the cemetery was just behind us, and they had a chain link fence. And he had a load of wood to deliver, so he was up there cutting wood, and I wasn't there, but my dad was, and the chainsaw got caught in the chain link fence and come back and hit him in the face. And he walked down to the house, and I guess my mom about had a fit. And 180 stitches later, he was okay. But the love of his horses caused him some pain too. One day he was taking a horse across the ditch, which had a cement overlay, so you could go, instead of going down into the ditch, you could go over it. And we had a chain with a halter on it, and it got wrapped around his leg or ankle, and it drugged him, and he always called it alpine skiing. And it pulled his leg right out of his hip socket, and I went down to see him, and they had a metal rod. They had drilled through his knee. And one doctor on each side grabbed that metal rod and pulled his hip, or his leg back into his hip. And he said that's the worst he'd ever hurt. But he had this saying about get your belly, and on his nephews and nieces would always run when he said, I'm going to get your belly. Except my son. Jess, he would run to him because he thought it was funny. But he's autistic, and Craig always loved him and would always buy him raisin bread when we took dinner to him every Sunday. He'd always have a loaf of raisin bread for Jess on the tree farm twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. We'd make that trip. And he was so sharp all the time, even to the day he died. It was down to 1 gallon per minute per share. And so I'd always say, well, how long we got? And he'd rattle off the number just like that. His math was unspeakable. But, brother, we do love you. And we'd like to thank those that are tuning in through the internet. And we'd like to thank all you who showed up. Thank you.
I'd like to thank those who have shared those thoughts and memories with us at this time. We'd like to go ahead and hear some more memories and stories. So the time is open for everyone here to come up and share a thought or memory. So we'll have you go ahead and take that time to share those thoughts with us.
I just want to share a little moment with Craig that I had when I had birth our son Jess. He came into the hospital and he held that little one and put him close to his heart, and he had tears in his eyes. And he looked at me and he said to me, he says, you have a son here that is amazing. And he is close to his Savior. And at first I was like, did I get that correctly? But he loved my kids. And all three of them adored their Uncle Craig and knew where they stood with him and knew exactly what he thought. And many times they would say, what would Uncle Craig think in my decisions I'm making? And he loved my children, and he opened his arms up to me from day one. And we loved Craig. And he had such a good, honest, deep heart. Crusty exterior. I met Craig at the Lehigh Roundup Rodeo. And my first thought was, oh, what am I getting into? But as soon as he knew that his brother loved me, he loved me too. And I appreciated that.
I am Craig's neighbor from the tree farm area. And just listening to all of your memories of him, I have a suspicion that you don't have too many memories of Craig when he was absolutely speechless. And I do. So I want to share that. Craig did help any way he could. He would call me up. I live alone, I don't have family. He would call me up every couple days to be sure I was okay. Until he went into the hospital, he would do that. And Brett and Craig stop by my gate every time they come down to work the tree farm, and they always bring me something. I don't have to worry about eating all through the summer months because I have my food. And they bring too much, and I say, now wait a minute, there's only me, and you're bringing enough for 5 people. This will do me for a week. So his generosity will always be appreciated and thought of. But because he always was there to help, this one time I had about a 20-year-old stove, and the handle to the oven had broken on one side. And I was telling Craig this, and I said, I could patch it up, but it's really shaky, and I think it's going to break. I'm just going to get me a new stove. And we were talking about different ovens and stoves and things, and he said, well, now wait a minute. He says, I'm in sheet metal. I've worked it all my life. I can come and do something with that stove. He says, I'll fix your handle for you, and you won't have to buy a new stove. Brett was with him, and they came over one night after they had finished their work on the tree farm. Craig had all his tools, and he's kneeling in front of this door of the oven, and he's got his tools out, and he says, oh, this is simple. He says, I can just put a screw right here, and it'll be as good as new. So he gets it out, and he starts to put in this screw, and he is pushing, and he's pushing, and he's harder than I thought, and he's pushing. All of a sudden, the entire door shatters. It just shatters, and it's all over the floor. Fortunately, he didn't get hurt. And his mouth dropped open and just sat there. And I had to laugh. And he felt so bad. I felt bad for Craig because he felt so bad that he had caused this entire thing to shatter, but Craig was speechless. So I had to share that with you. I thanked him because it made me get a new stove for myself for Christmas. I said, I get a new Christmas present.
When that good sister said that you never saw Craig speechless except one time, so it prompted my memory, and I have to share another time that he is speechless. This is some years ago, and I don't remember why, but the bishop asked me if I'd knock on Craig's door and ask him something or tell him something. I can't remember what it was. So I did. I live just 3 doors north, 3 houses north of Craig. So I knocked on his door, and he ripped the door open like he's going to rip somebody's head off. And then he saw who it was. And so he settled down. He said, Ken, there's something you need to know. I hate niggers and I hate Mormons. So don't ever knock on my door again. So I said to Craig, well, Craig, there's something you need to know. I'm your neighbor, and I'll knock on your door any damn time I want to. And he was totally speechless. He didn't know what to say. But over the years, Craig and I became very good friends, and I'll always cherish his friendship. From time to time, we'd take a meal to him, and he'd always repay with a gallon of apple juice, or someplace, I think it was in Mount Pleasant, I don't know, someplace where we like to stop and eat, and they had the best carrots that you ever seen, and he'd bring this plate of the carrots that he got from that place, and he was very, very thoughtful and very kind. But I wanted to know that there's at least 2 times that he was speechless.
my gosh, that's like the scariest guy ever. I know some of you guys can relate to that. And I never really understood that because, like Tony said, if you know him, you know how sweet and kind and great he was. My littlest was born, he came over, oh gosh, when was that? Right when he came home. We'd had him home maybe 2 days out of the hospital, and he came and brought us a gift. And I don't know why it surprised me, but it did, I guess. I don't know. It shouldn't have, but it did. And I was always just so grateful that he was always thinking of us and our family. And I knew, and I wrote this on Facebook the other day when he died, I knew if I ever needed anything at all, I knew my Uncle Greg would be there for me. And I wasn't shy about telling anybody that either, because one time in high school I had this jerk teacher. Short little guy, just a jerk. And he tried to intimidate everybody. And he came up to me at the end of the school year and he said, "Why can't I intimidate you?" And I said, "You've never met my uncles, have you?" Meaning Corey and Craig. And so both of them taught me never to let anybody intimidate me, never let anybody push me around, and that they always had my back, and I really appreciated that. Check in, see how he was doing, and say, "Hey, I got this going on, what's your thoughts?" And obviously the first thing they want to say, well, give me their names and number. But then he just, his wisdom, it would just get me thinking, you're right, and that's definitely what I need to do. So I've always appreciated that about Buckner. I don't have a whole lot to say other than that I appreciated him taking such good care of my mother. They were a good team. And I know it wasn't always easy, but I'm really excited to know that they're up in heaven and getting a chance to reunite. So thank you for the opportunity.
The third time that Craig was speechless. One Sunday, we were at my grandma David's house, and he was like, "Let's go ride the horses." I loved horses and wanted to ride so bad. My parents were like, no, you do not do things on Sunday. Well, Uncle Craig took me to ride that horse, and I got bucked off that horse. And I'll never forget him coming over to me, and I think he was like, oh shiz, I'm gonna tell your mother. I mean, he knew he was in trouble, I think, that happened. So I think he was kind of lost for words, but there's so many memories of Uncle Craig, and like many of us, we probably can't share them right here. But I forgot about him always wanting to grab your belly. Oh, that would like drive me nuts when he would say that. I was like, no, I can only take so much, and he just would want to tickle. But there's one thing, I lived at my Aunt Cass and Uncle Craig's house all weekend long. That was my go-to to be with my cousins. And there was always something with the memory we can remember of Uncle Craig. Always. And just such great, great memories of, I just wonder how many cats up in heaven were waiting for him. Like, I just wonder if they're all lined up, because you said they liked everything but cats. And I'll never forget all the cat stories. And I'm sure they were all just waiting, saying, this day, this day, this day, you got me, Uncle Craig. But, yeah, what a guy, what a story. And it's so weird that with all the Buckners, when we were just kids back then, I don't remember any of us all growing up to where we are today, but you always think we're always going to be around forever. I didn't think Uncle Craig would ever go anytime soon. He was too stubborn to get to heaven. But I hope that he's with Patsy as well. And they are just up there dancing around, making those canes. But thanks, Uncle Craig, for all the good memories.
I always thought his Craig was like a second dad. When I was in elementary school, my dad got a bear tag. And we decided that Craig was going to come and he was going to share the hotel room. I don't know how Patsy ever slept. That man snored like a bear. He's been a lot to me. He's a good role model. But I do know that he's a lot quieter when he sleeps this way. And I know that he's with his Heavenly Father.
So a lot of you probably don't know me. I've only been in the family about 4 years. I met Craig about 4 years ago, so I feel it's kind of appropriate. I'm Bryn's husband, so I remember the first time I met Craig, and it was interesting. I was still coming down because the week before I met Bryn's parents for the first time, and we were going shooting. And anybody who knows Brett, when we go shooting, it's go big or go home. So I walk in with my 3 little measly guns, and I'm like, oh, we're shooting, cool. Here's 80 guns laid out. Which ones do we want to take? And all the ammo, I'm like, Then we're going out into the West Desert, and I've never been out there before. I'm like, this is where I die. Just kind of driving out in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, yeah, here we go. So I'm coming down from that the week before, and we're over for Sunday dinner, and Brett tells me, get in the truck, we got over to Craig's. I'm sitting here like, who's Craig? Nobody's mentioned Craig. And we're going over there, and the first thing that he says when I hop out the truck, I'm like, how you doing? You're Craig? And he said that famous saying, not worth a damn, but thanks for asking. And I'm sitting there like, this is the part where he brings in the compass. Craig. Because Craig had just got done smoking a cigarette and threw it down on the grass and was just looking at me. Just kind of staring me down. Like. And then he asked the golden question of, so you're dating my niece? Yeah. I'm doing that. He's like, you think you're good enough? I'm trying. And that was the answer he wanted. And ever since then, I was family. And even though he didn't know me very well, and I didn't know him very well, he was always there for us. Like Brendan said, Porter wasn't home, I think, a week. And here he comes with presents, and he's a 70-year-old guy who's buying presents for a baby, 70-years-old, especially a single guy. And here he comes like, I didn't know what he needed, but here's this stuff, and we'll get more if you need more. And it was just funny because Porter, being a week home from the hospital, just smiled at him. He's like, I don't want to hold him, I'll drop him. But he's cute. And that's about as much as Porter and Craig met each other. But Porter loved him for the first time he seen him. Just smiled at him, and he loves his little blanket that he got from him. So, it's my memories of Craig.
Is there anyone else who would like to share one last memory before we move on? Okay. We'll go ahead and move forward then. We're going to have a couple of poems by his grandchildren. Following that, then I'll share a few remarks, and then we'll have our closing prayer by Casey, Buckner, Montague.
Happy the man, and happy he alone, he who can call today his own. He who's secure within can say, tomorrow do thy worst, for I live today. Be fair or full, or rain or shine, the joys I possessed, in spite of faith, are mine. Not heaven itself, upon the power, past has power, but what has been, and I have had my hour.
Nature's first spring is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay.
Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For thou from out art born of time and place, flood may bear me far. I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Under the harvest moon, when the soft silver jets shimmering over the burning nights, death, the gray mocker, comes and whispers to you, as a beautiful friend who remembers. Under the summer roses, when the flagrant crimson lurks in the dusk, the wild red leaves, love with little hands, comes and touches you with 1,000 memories and asks you beautiful unanswerable questions.
Warm summer sun, shine kindly here. Warm southern wind, blow softly here. Green sod above, light, light, high light. Good night, dear heart. Good night, good night.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts and sentiments. And often it's asked, what is the measure of a man? Or what is the measure of a life? Well, it's always remarked, the measure is in the influence we have on others. And as I've sat here and listened to the stories that have been shared about Craig and his life, and listening to his children and siblings speak, he had a profound impact on those that he had influence on. And that is his legacy that will carry on as you continue to remember him and remember those stories that you share with him. Keep them cherished. Along with his grandchildren, I'd like to share one more poem and a thought with you. And this is from Henry Van Dyke. And when asked multiple times about what he thought about death, this is the poem that he came up with. He said, "I'm standing upon the seashore, a ship at my side, spreads her white sails to move to the breeze, and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white dust just where the sky and sea come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, 'There, she's gone.' Gone where? Gone from my sight, that is all. She is just as large in mast, hull, and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, 'There, she is gone,' there are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, 'Here she comes,' and that is dying." Craig is not gone. He is just out of sight, just for a moment, but he's with many of his other loved ones there with him. I know that this life is not the end, but just another journey in our adventure. And so Craig has many other stories and many other adventures that he's going to have, and he's going to be there with you along the way to lift you up and to continue to provide the strength which he had and the courage which he bore. So I share that testimony with you humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for the memories that we have of our family, and we're grateful for our family, for the relationships, and for the love that we share with each other. Father, we're grateful for thy Son, Jesus Christ, and for his infinite mercy. For his love and for his sacrifice. That we may have this time to live and to learn and to become more like thee. We ask, Father, that we are able to hold on to the good memories and to be able to build our relationships even stronger with our families. That we will learn from each other. Help us, Father, to remember thee in all that we do, and have thy Spirit with us to guide and direct us in our path. And we ask for these favors and blessings in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.